Hey there, welcome back to Blender Gunpla. Today we're going to continue working on this piece here, which is designed to go onto this high-grade Zaku shield. So in last episode, if you haven't seen that, you can go back and check it out. We designed kind of the basic structure of this part, and I went ahead and 3D printed it so that we could make sure that it fits nicely on the shield, and it does. And so given that that's true, I want to add today a little bit of additional detail, probably down here below this angled part. And I also want to add an insignia up here onto this rectangular insignia area that we designed. But given that that isn't going to impact the fit of the piece here onto the shield, we're not going to, for the first time probably ever in this series, we're not going to care a lot about the precise dimensions of things. So I'm going to have kind of a freestyle design session today where I don't really at this moment even know what I'm going to create. You might know because you've seen the thumbnail, and so you probably have a better idea of how this is going to turn out than I do. But I do know I want to add something down in here, and I want to add an insignia up onto this area here. And for that, I know also that I'm going to use the Gunpla Gallery logo, which you see back there on the wall behind me. So quick plug, if you don't know, gunplagallery.com is a website that I created a couple of years ago. And if you're a builder and you want to share photo galleries of your builds, you can do that there. It's free. There's a good community there. You can sign up and share your work there. Whether you're a beginner or you've been doing this for a long time and consider yourself a pro, any skill level is certainly welcome. Good place to share your work. But with that aside, let's get back to building this part. So that's the intro for today. I'm gonna jump into Blender. I don't really have an idea of exactly what I'm gonna do, but we're gonna just do some freestyle design here and see how it turns out. Let's go. Okay, so here we are in Blender with our part loaded in the way that we left it after the last episode. And we have the part itself, and then we have this cube here. I'll select it so that you can see the wireframe better. And this was the representation of the size and shape of the shield part that we're fitting this over the top of. So I'm gonna leave that turned on, and I can see the wireframe here with the black outlines, just so that I can make sure that I stay within those boundaries. And then if I do that, as we talked about in the intro, I don't have to worry about the exact dimensions of anything that I'm creating. I just need to stay within that rectangle. And also to make sure that when I place things, I place them at z = 0, which will make them be flat on the upper surface of that shield. So with that, let's go here to a top view, I guess, and we will start to sketch out something that goes down here in this area. And so I'm going to use the ND fast menu, so the F key for most of this work probably, instead of the Shift 2 full menu, because I believe that what it predicts here for most of what we're gonna need is gonna be correct. So I'm gonna start with a single vertex. I'm going to hit Alt-Z to make this piece semi-transparent so that we can see through it, and that way we can see as we move this vertex around. I'm also going to use the grid, I think, as a way to snap this piece into place. So I'm going to start about there, and I'm going to extrude it downward. I want to create something that comes down, I don't know, maybe about that far. And then I'm going to put an angled edge on it down here, and then take it across the bottom part of this here. I'm not sure how far over here I want to put it. Let's just go to there for now. And extrude it again up this way, and then extrude it straight up behind there. So we can make a piece that's kind of coming down from there. I would also like something up here in this area, just a little bit of something. So I'm going to use this same part, and I'm going to extrude it down to about there, I guess. This part here doesn't matter because it's going to be inside of this slanted bit. So I'm just getting myself over here to a good area where I can come straight up, and then I'm going to follow that angle up this way. Yeah, that seems good. And then just going to make manifold to close that in. So that way I've got a little bit of an angled shape sticking out of that part, and then this part as well. I'm going to hit Alt-Z again to make this solid so that we can see kind of how that shape works. It has no thickness yet, right? But this way we can see how it works with what we're doing here. And I like that. Okay, I think I need this part to be a little bit wider because I don't want it to be a similar width to that up there. I want it to be wider. So I'm going to tab into here and go to these two. Well, I guess all three of those, right? And move them in the X direction. Maybe just over 1, 2? Nah, it's too wide. We'll just go there. Yeah, that seems good. I like the look of that better. Okay, cool. So now we're going to select that and we're going to solidify it. And pretty sure that the thickness of the part itself we made last time was 1 millimeter. And I think I also said at that time, that I try to avoid making structural bits that are thinner than 1 millimeter, just because I want to make sure that they print nice and solid and that there isn't any warping or problems with them. However, I want this to be definitely shorter than the 1 millimeter part there. So I'm actually going to make this just 0.5 millimeter. So 500 here. And I'm going to hit the W key a couple times to change the weighting. Actually, just one time to change the weighting to positive. Lock that in. That way this is sitting at that level that we need it to sit on the shield, but it's not sticking up above this other part that we already had. So yeah, I like that up here quite a lot. And then this part down here, I kind of want to have like a border around the outside of it. And had I known I was going to decide that, I might have done this a little differently, because this is all one part. So if I make a border around the whole thing, it's going to also be up here as well. So I want a raised border just around this bit. And rather than splitting that so that I can do an inset set and then a extrude or something like that, I think instead I'm just going to draw another part again. So we'll look again from the top view, and we will create another single vertex, and we will move it to where this one started, and we'll extrude it down here again. So we're just basically tracing the same outline with a second shape. I did that wrong. Let's move it back here. There we go. Right there, and then up to here. Anywhere up here is fine. So I'm not going to close this one off. I'm just going to leave it as an outline, and yeah, that'll work. And then we can profile extrude it to give it some vertical, not horizontal heights. We'll hit the A key to switch the axis up to make it the Z axis, and that way we're making this thing taller. I guess I'll do 750, so 3/4 of a millimeter. And again, I've got to hit the weighting to make sure that it's above the Z axis. So I want positive weighting there, and we'll go ahead and lock that in. So now we have an infinitely thin vertical outline around that's sticking up just barely above the edge of the part. And we can hit the F menu again and choose solidify and give it some thickness, right? So what if I go, is that too much thickness there? If I go 0.5 millimeter, that's not too bad. And then I can choose whether to leave it like that or to make it skinnier like that or wider like that. I actually like the neutral weighting in this case. I think that looks good with the shape of the part. Yeah, so there's something. And that, I think, gives the whole shape its overall structure that I had in mind. I don't want to add any more big sections to this at this point. I like how that's looking. I do want to add some detail here in the sort of sunken in part of this new area that we've created, though. And so part of me wants to do like some pipes, like a couple of pipes coming up from here and then over and then connecting down into here. But I'm realizing as I say that we haven't done any tutorials in this series yet about how to create pipes. And so we'll save that for the future. A future series, little mini series, we'll talk about different ways to create piping detail. But for now, instead, I'm just going to use some primitives. So let's create a cylinder. Yeah, we'll turn some cylinders on their side. So in this add cylinder thing here, I'm going to up the vertices to 64 just to make sure that it's nice and, you know, it's got a lot of nice rounded detail on the cylinder. And then let's go ahead and turn it Which direction do we need to turn it? 90, no, that's the wrong way. Okay, we'll switch that back to 0. And this is the 90 degree that we want. Yeah, so that lays it on its side. And yeah, the rest of it we can just do with scaling. So I'll minimize that, and let's move this kind of over here somewhere. This would be easier if we were looking at it from the top. So we'll do that real quick, and we'll move it kind of down here. I'm gonna scale it in the X direction just to make it just slightly less wide than this indented area here. So I'm thinking something kind of like that. And then obviously it's sitting below the edge of what we're looking at here, way below. So we'll move it in the Z direction up this way. And what I want is for it to be sticking out a little bit this way. And I'm just thinking about how we could either cut this bottom part off, or we could just scale it. We'll scale it in the Z and kind of flatten it down like this. And then if we look again straight from the side, we can move this in the Z direction just a little more. That way the bottom half of it is nicely tucked away inside of this other piece and we don't have to worry about it. But the top is sticking out up here and we can do something interesting with it. However, I think that it's a little bit too fat in the Y direction. So I'm gonna shrink it down a bit like this. And a little bit more in the Z direction, a little flatter there, and move it down just a little bit like that. And then we have a detail that I can work with. And so now that we have that, let's open the fast menu again and go to our array modifier. We want to copy this not in the X direction. We want to copy it in that direction, which is the Y local direction of that object. And I'm going to bring the offset down. So I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to roll my mouse wheel down, or just use my cursor, I guess. I'm going to pull this down. I think I want them actually to overlap just slightly. So we'll go something like that. See how that kind of looks. Yeah, something like that'll work. All right, I'm going to open that array modifier again, and I'm going to change the axis back to Y again, and I'm going to roll the count up higher. So I want it like all the way up to there. That way they're filling in all of this space. And there might be a tiny edge up here where it's not overlapping correctly. Actually, it's not bad. I was going to move it up just a little to fill that in if that was the case, but this looks fine to me. So that's good. We could move this all the way down to here, but then I think it'll interact with this angled area down here in a slightly strange way. So let's actually create something else, a different detail to go down there. Let me just look at this one more time with this rounded thing to make sure that I'm happy with that. I think I am. So we'll go again to the top view and we'll create a single vertex, and we will move it. Actually, before we move it, let's zoom in so that we can get a finer view of our grid. So if we have more grid squares here, we'll be able to... that was bad. There we go. I clicked when I didn't mean to. So if we have more grid squares here, we'll be able to snap to more things. So now we can move this point down this way. And we have much finer control over what we're snapping to. So I'm going to snap about there, I think. We could actually, so I'm a little concerned or a little annoyed with that this doesn't line up horizontally with the edge of that just perfectly. I could snap this out to the edge of the grid, but it's going to be close enough that it's probably fine. So we'll extrude this down this way. Want it to go straight this way. So something about like, let's say that. Then we'll follow this angle down this way. And we'll go over this way. Now let's see, we are about 2 grid squares in from that corner, so I need to be 2 grid squares in from this corner. So I'm using the grid to make this thing symmetric as we go. I could have done half of this and then mirrored it. That would have also worked, but this will work as well. So we'll fill that in. So that is centered and symmetric in that space there, which is good. That was what I was after. And now I can solidify this thing and bring it up. Again, we'll change the weighting to positive, and then I'll just eyeball the height here to something that I think looks good. I'll hit Alt-Z again to make it solid so we can see it a little better. So yeah, I want it coming up, but not as high as these rounded things. So that seems close. I can always go back into the solidify modifier and make it a little taller if I'd like, just like that. Okay, so yeah, that'll work. And that kind of finishes that out nicely. I think I want some sort of additional detail in here though. And so let's go with another cylinder. I'm gonna Shift A, add a cylinder. This one does not, if you're wondering where it is, it's up here at the origin. So this one does not have to, I don't think, have more vertices than the default. And we'll move it down. The idea here is to maybe cut out a cylinder and then have another one inside of it. So I'll show you what I mean here. And we can use the grid to center this if we wanted to. We could be more precise even than that. I'm just actually gonna eyeball it because with a detail this small, this is probably close enough. So we'll do that. And then I'm gonna Shift D to duplicate that, and I'm gonna scale it down like this to give a bit of a border. And then what we can do is we can take this outer one and shift click here, go into our fast menu and do a difference. So we've cut that cylinder out of that weird shaped piece that we created there. And then I'm gonna hide this wireframe. And then I can use this one to fill in that circular space we cut out. Now it's obviously extending way too far down below the bottom of our piece here, so I'm gonna scale it in the Z direction and make it a lot thinner, and then we'll move it upward in the Z direction and fill this in here. And again, the height, I'm just gonna eyeball it to get something that I'm happy with. Now we could cut another, like a horizontal line or something in there, but I think at this point that is the level of detail that I want to go with for this episode. We're gonna do super fine detail in the next episode of the series. So this is giving me, yeah, basically the idea, a good idea of, or close to the idea I had in mind of filling in this area down here. And we added a little detail up there as well. So let's move on and work on the insignia that we're gonna put up here in this rectangular area. All right, so I've gone and found the logo that I want to put here on this insignia plate. It's an SVG file. I saved it on my desktop. So we can go here to import and SVG, and here is our logo. And what you might notice when you work with SVG files in Blender, you'll see that nothing visually happened when we imported that, because usually the file that you import is either going to be rendered very small or very large. But you can see over here in the scene collection that it did import this SVG and it created a path. And so if we select that, we can see that the path is centered here because that's the origin dot for it. But it's probably just very small. And so what I'm going to do is, with that selected, I'm just going to hit S to scale it, and I'm going to drag my mouse until I start to see it, and there it is. So yeah, it was quite small, and I've had to scale it up quite a lot to get it even just to this size here. We'll go into a top view so that we can try to center it in this area. And again, we'll hit Alt-Z to make this all semi-transparent. And we'll move it up into this space here. And again, I'm going to scale it a little bit more because I do want it to be a little bit larger. and then we can just eyeball it, and I'll use the grid again to try to sort of vertically and horizontally get it centered within this space. And that's going to be pretty close right there. So now we have that sitting in place. It's infinitely flat vertically again, so we'll definitely have to solidify it. But the other thing to keep in mind when you're working with files that you've loaded, especially like things like SVGs, is that they come in as a path. So if you see this little green icon here to the right of our object where we've got it selected in the scene collection, that denotes that it's a path. And the little triangle with the points on the corners is a mesh. And so to work with this and to do difference operations and things like that we're going to need to do with it, we need this object to be a mesh, not a path. And so we can right click and we can say convert to, and then mesh. Oh, it's not a path, it's a curve. Excuse me. So yeah, now we've changed our curve object into a mesh object, and now it will behave like we expect it to when we do things like solidify. So again, we can solidify it vertically and give it some thickness. And then we're obviously going to need to move it up so that it's overlapping this edge here. And what I'm going to do to make that very precise is to look at it straight from the side here, and we'll move it in the Z direction, and we'll pull it up kind of like that. I want it to stick out above this surface just a little bit, because what we're going to do is we're going to use a difference, and we're going to actually subtract that out of the surface to make a recessed detail of the logo. So we select our cutter object first, and then we shift select our object that we're cutting out of, and we hit our menu and we go difference, and we'll see that that then got cut out. I'm going to hit H to hide that wireframe. Now, a couple things to notice here. One is that the edges of what we've cut out have our bevels, and if you remember from the previous episode, we applied a bevel modifier to this entire piece once we got it all put together, because I wanted to have those nice little rounded edges there. However, I want these edges to be sharp. And so a thing that you can do, if you go and select the object in question that has the bevel modifier, and you see the modifier stack over here, the order of things here matters. And so by default, what ND always does is it leaves your bevel modifier at the bottom of the stack, so that everything else that you're doing happens first, and then the bevel happens at the end. If we move the order of things in our stack here, we can change how that works. And so if I find the difference, and it's probably this one that's selected, but we can temporarily turn it off to see if that's the case. So yes, turning that off makes that logo disappear. So this is the difference for our logo, because we have another difference here. That's the one to cut out the shield. So if we take this one, we can just grab it and drag it down here in the stack to the bottom of the stack, and then that makes those edges sharp instead, which is what I want in this case. And so yeah, just keep in mind you can change the order of things in your modifier stack over here and create different effects because it is processed from top to bottom. The other thing you could have done is apply some of those modifiers first, and then, you know, that way you can control the order that they happen as well. But you don't have to apply them to make this happen. You can just change the order there. So now we have our Gunpla Gallery logo there on our shield. We have this other detail piece that we've created. I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Those were the two ideas that I had in mind that I wanted to take care of. We'll come back next time and we'll add some other even smaller, finer details. Maybe there need to be some little bolt details around the corners of this thing, or something like that, or maybe a couple of panel lines up along this stripe, just to finish out the part and give it a little bit more interesting look. But yeah, that's where we are for today. I'm going to leave it there. We'll come back next time and add those fine details to the part. If you have any questions or comments about what we've done so far, definitely let me know down below. I will either answer them there or roll them into a future episode if it's something that needs video explanation. So with that, I hope you have a good day. I will see you next time, and go build something cool in Blender.